keeping watch through days and decades. She's witnessed the high drama of democracy, Arizona's struggle for statehood, deal-making, groundbreaking, even murder. If it happened behind these walls and windows, beneath this copper dome, then it happened on Victory's watch.
There's a statue on top of our dome. Her name is Winged Victory.
From high atop the Arizona State Capitol building, Winged Victory greets visitors with open arms.
You've passed House Bill 2292. Signed in open session, the Secretary
Those who come to watch history unfold as lawmakers shape Arizona's future, and others who come to wander through the state's colorful past.
These were copies of the original desk. They're not very fancy, are they? They're just a simple wooden desk. This is what the early legislators were given, but you know what?
The Capitol building is a museum today. It features an extensive collection of artifacts and information about territorial and state government history. Michael Carmen knows this building inside and out. He was hired as the museum's director in 1984. A short time later, he was trying to solve a mystery.
Well, in observing the building, I noticed that there appeared to be at least a 5-foot space between the inside dome, which is plaster, and the outside dome, which is now coated with copper. And it only made sense if there was a space there, there should be an access to it.
So he explored the building's deepest, darkest recesses, looking for an entrance to the dome.
The challenge was there's a space up there, and I can't get in it. There may be something in there that I want to find.
The search was long and frustrating, a lot like Arizona's attempts to become a state more than a century ago. Shortly after President Lincoln approved the formation of the Arizona Territory in 1863, a capital was established in what now is Prescott, but it didn't stay there for long.
They moved it down to Tucson for about 10 years. Prescott was able to convince them to come back, and then shortly after that, the capital was moved from Prescott down to Phoenix, where it found what appears to be a permanent home.
1889 was the year the capital made its final stop in Phoenix. The Territorial Assembly met on the second floor of what was then Phoenix City Hall. It immediately formed a commission to find a site for a brand new capital. The commission would eventually decide on a location at the end of Washington Street, primarily because its owners agreed to make major improvements on the property and to deed it to the territory for only $1. Years went by with very little progress. Then, in 1898, the Assembly selected a design by architect James Riley Gordon, and construction began the very next year. Nearly $136,000, and 2 years later, the Arizona Territory had a new Capitol building, and Winged Victory had a home.
The figure on top of the dome was apparently in the architect's mind from the onset. The drawings he did of the building for submission to win the contract to design the Capitol included a figure that's just roughly sketched, but is definitely a figure with large wings.
Victory stands atop the Capitol dome, holding a torch of liberty in one hand and a wreath of victory in the other. She's a larger-than-life wind vane, purchased by the Arizona Territory for just $160.
She's quite large. Of course, she has to be to appear as she does as significant from the ground level, but the Winged Victory is 17 foot tall and weighs approximately 700 pounds, and yet she turns with just 7 miles per hour of wind. She turns rapidly.
In the 1950s, she was forced to stop. Some lawmakers apparently were offended whenever Victory turned her backside towards the front of the Capitol.
I think offended is putting it mildly.
So they turned her around and tied her down permanently, facing east.
It kept everybody happy, except Wing Victory. She got pretty well banged up in the process of having all those winds buffeting her and not being able to turn into the wind as she had in the past. That's one of the reasons they had to take her down and do the work on her.
It was during the mid-1970s when Victory was removed from the Capitol for much-needed repairs.
She was taken down during the first renovation of the building, and they had found some holes in her with somebody taking some pot shots at her, and did a weatherproof finish on her and put her back up there. But except for that one brief period, she's always been up there. Today she rotates completely freely, 360 degrees, and during a storm, she gets pretty active up there.
The winds of change couldn't blow fast enough for the people of the Arizona Territory. They finally had a Capitol building, but what they really wanted was to become a state.
Well, that was part of the whole plan, was to be able to prove to Congress that, yes, we're ready to become a state. Look, we even have a wonderful, appropriate state capitol ready to go as soon as you make us a state.
That sentiment was articulated by Territorial Governor Nathan Oakes Murphy at the building's formal dedication on February the 25th, 1901. The Arizona Gazette quotes him as saying the building is a fitting monument to the vigor, courage, and patriotism of this young Commonwealth.
It would do credit to any state in the Union, and we are all justly proud of it. It is here and has but one further promotion before it, and that is to become the capital of the grand state of Arizona.
Those words brought hope to many of the 120,000 people living in the territory at the time. But hope was one thing, and statehood was quite another. Finally, in 1910, after 3 decades of failed attempts, Congress gave the people of the Arizona Territory permission to draft a state constitution. A constitutional convention was convened in the House chambers on October the 10th, 1910. 52 delegates, led by convention president George W.P. Hunt, worked for 8 weeks before finally adopting a draft constitution. It was ratified by the Arizona voters and sent to Washington for final approval. That's where it hit a roadblock in the form of President William Howard Taft. Taft, a former judge, was opposed to a section in the Constitution that allowed Arizona voters to recall judges, and he refused to endorse statehood unless that provision was removed.
The suggestion that statehood could be denied because the people in the territory wanted to have the, at the time, very liberal requirement in their constitution that judges were subject to recall by the electorate was very offensive. And people in the territory had an immediate referendum. They took out the words including judges and amended the Constitution to satisfy the president. He approved it. We became a state on February 14th, 1912. In the very first election following that, they put those words right back in there.
Arizona became the nation's 48th state on Valentine's Day, February the 14th, 1912.
People had arranged for bells to ring throughout the territory. There were dynamite charges lit off in celebration. Cannons roared.
George W.P. Hunt, who presided over the Constitutional Convention, took the oath of office as the state's first governor. He called the recently elected Arizona State Legislature into session, and they immediately went to work. At the very first statewide election, voters not only restored the recall of judges to Arizona's Constitution, they also gave Arizona women the right to vote. That's something most other American women would not get for another 8 years. Victory presided over a number of historical moments in 1912. but she probably didn't expect to be witness to a murder. On Tuesday, May 7th, at about 11:30 in the morning, a man identified as Kaufman walked into the Surveyor General's office on the first floor of the state capitol building. He fired his .32 caliber revolver 4 times, killing the chief clerk, then emerged into the lobby where he shot himself straight through the heart. Lawmakers meeting upstairs at the time hardly noticed the commotion, according to a news report in the Arizona Republican that says, "It was thought so unlikely that there would be a shooting in such a place that most people assumed it was just the explosion of harmless bombs exploded by some practical joker." The motive for murder may have been a real estate transaction gone bad. On the other hand, witnesses suggested the gunman was delusional. Whatever the case, he was obviously prepared to die. A note found in his pocket gave specific instructions about what to do with his remains and his personal belongings. Strange tragedies like that often have the makings of a good ghost story. But there aren't any ghosts haunting these hallways. At least none that we know of. However, visitors to the State Capitol Museum are sometimes startled when they turn the corner and see Governor Hunt staring them straight in the eye.
It is kind of shocking.
It looks like it's real.
He looks good enough that if you gave him CPR, he'd probably be alive again.
He does look like he's alive, ready to talk to you, doesn't he?
Yeah, he does.
The wax figure is a stunning likeness of the man nicknamed Old Walrus. He's one of the most influential public officials in state history, the only person elected governor of Arizona 7 times, and by all accounts, a real character.
No question about it. Anybody that could be governor 7 times for 2-year terms and then go through that really wonderful parallel to the 2000 election.
If you thought the presidential election between George W. Bush and Al Gore in 2000 was a mess, just look at what happened in Arizona more than 80 years earlier. In 1916, Governor Hunt was running for re-election against Thomas Campbell. When Campbell was declared the winner by 32 votes, Hunt took immediate action.
Hunt literally locked Campbell out of the building, claiming victory and voter fraud.
When Inauguration Day arrived, Hunt refused to vacate the governor's office. So, in separate ceremonies, both he and Campbell were sworn in, giving Arizona, at least in theory, 2 chief executives.
Absolutely. Governor Hunt had an office in the Capitol, and he was collecting a paycheck, by the way, because he controlled the money. The treasurer actually worked for him. Governor Campbell, if you accept his victory, had an office down the street in the Adams Hotel, and he was not being paid, nor was his staff. And they maintained the dual governorship until the courts made that first decision that Campbell had indeed prevailed.
After recounting ballots, the Maricopa County Superior Court named Campbell the winner. Hunt relinquished the governor's office, but appealed all the way up to the Arizona Supreme Court. State's High Court made its ruling on December the 22nd, 1917. By unanimous decision, the court declared George Hunt the winner by 43 votes. After 11 months in the governor's office, Campbell was forced to leave, and Hunt moved right back in.
That's the Wild West. That's Arizona's version of the Wild West, anyway.
The Wild West, through the eyes of cowboy artist Lon McGargy, is captured on canvas at the Arizona Capitol Museum.
That's another wonderful Governor Hunt story, you know. And McGargy was hitchhiking from Los Angeles back into Phoenix when he was picked up on the road, I'm not sure exactly where, by none other than George W.P. Hunt. Of course, they talked. Hunt found out that McGargy was a painter, and before they got back to Phoenix, Hunt and McGargy had negotiated a contract for McGargy to paint 15 paintings for the walls of the Capitol, and also to go to the World's Exposition that was coming up at that time. And McGargy cranked them out, and we still have them on display in the halls on the 2nd floor.
Several of McGargy's paintings, including this one, entitled Irrigation, were later etched in silver, a gift from the people of Arizona to the battleship that shares the state's name.
It is absolutely gorgeous. It is the most ornate silver service ever made for a battleship. It is so Arizona in nature that, and so unique with the copper on the dishes and the saguaros and everything else. It's a very emotional piece, though, the silver service is.
Alice Duckworth, tour coordinator for the Capitol Museum, says the silver was not aboard the USS Arizona when she sank in Pearl Harbor on December the 7th, 1941.
Previous to that, in around, I think it was January of 41, they'd been in Bremerton, Washington. And because the world was so uneasy, there was war in Europe, there was war in Asia, they decided to strip for battle. And the silver service was removed and placed into storage at that time. Getting it back was not a question of diving down into the harbor, but convincing the Navy that they ought to give it back.
The silver was returned to Arizona in 1953. It's now part of the museum's most popular exhibit.
We did a survey about 3 years ago, and we asked people as they went through the museum, to rank what they saw, and the USS Arizona and her silver service came up number 1. It is part of our way to keep the history of the Arizona and her men alive so that people don't forget what happened at Pearl Harbor.
So many stories, relics, and reminders of Arizona's past are waiting to be discovered at the Arizona Capitol Museum. Of course, one of the most interesting artifacts would have to be the building itself. During construction in 1899, a bit of controversy erupted. Instead of the simple structure we see today, there were allegations that an extravagant and much more expensive capitol was being built. This sketch, offered as proof at the time, is indeed the work of James Riley Gordon, the architect who designed Arizona's capitol, but it's a plan he submitted for projects in other states, and according to Michael Carmen, it was never seriously considered for Arizona.
I don't think it was ever considered at all. I think that was simply a ploy used by some of the detractors that did not really want to see the territory spend $135,000 on a Capitol building. They wanted that money used for something else, and they were simply trying to drum up support against constructing a Capitol building.
There is one feature in the drawing that did receive careful consideration, a grand staircase leading to what is now the second floor.
Apparently, the Capitol Commission who made those decisions decided not to put the staircase in, that it was probably too expensive.
In the absence of a staircase, the second floor balcony and the area in front of the Capitol are often used for special events, including the inauguration of Arizona's governors. While perhaps not as grand as other state capitals, the Arizona State Capitol building has a rustic, regal appearance that seems to fit in the desert Southwest.
I think it's a proper reflection of Arizona's territorial values. It's simple and straightforward as you would think a territory should be.
I think this building was very, very appropriate for Phoenix in 1901 when it opened as the territorial capital. I think anything more ornate, it would have stood out like a sore thumb.
Walls of native rock rise 4 stories to support a shiny copper dome. The surface is treated to resist the elements, while copper covering the rest of the roof is allowed to tarnish. The copper is all relatively new, a gift from Arizona's copper industry, put in place in the mid-1970s. Through the years, the building has gone through a variety of changes. A fire suppression system was recently installed. Of course, the addition of air conditioning must have made life a lot easier for everyone.
Without air conditioning in the summer in Phoenix back in the early 1900s, it would have been really, really hot, but not as hot as we're doing nowadays. One of the things that would be a saving grace is the very, very thick rock walls and the fact that the building was set up with ventilation.
In the early days, electric fans circulated air, awnings provided shade, and the heat escaped through the skylights and windows.
And the round windows you see up there, we call bullseye windows, are almost like portholes. The glass in them does open, they pivot to allow rising hot air to escape.
The first thing I can tell you about the chandeliers and the lights is they're all reproductions. A lot of them are copied from photographs that we have in our archives.
All the original light fixtures, which were made of brass, were scrapped out during World War II as part of that war effort. They apparently missed one, or either that or somebody astutely retained one of the wall sconces in a storage room that we could use for the reconstruction process.
When the building opened in 1901, it had two types of lighting. It had gas lights pointing up and electric lights pointing down. Nowadays, the fire marshals would just have a fit if you tried to do such a thing these days, because that's so dangerous. When you look at the Great Seal of the State of Arizona, as we have it down here on the ground floor,
one of the first things people see when they visit the Capitol Museum is the colorful tile mosaic of Arizona's Great Seal. It was purchased at the end of the fiscal year 1923 with money left over in the state's budget.
It was all down, we had a big party, and then finally somebody came by and looked at it and went, oh my, it's wrong.
You see, the official Great Seal includes images representing the 5 C's historically important to Arizona's economy: copper, cattle, citrus, climate, and cotton.
After the Great Seal was installed, they looked down there in 1923 and they realized that it was missing 2 of the C's. The contractor couldn't get a copy of the official Great Seal that was drawn by E. Mutter back in 1910. So what he did was he went around and sketched various seals that he found in the Capitol area. He sent those sketches to a place known as Zanesville, Ohio, and they did a composite. They sent their sketch back, which was supposedly okayed by somebody over in the legislature, and then they made it and installed it. It did take a while before anybody noticed that there was something wrong. For some reason, we have no cattle and we have no citrus.
There was also no money left in the state's budget to fix the unfortunate oversight.
Now, all these years later, it's a historic artifact. And it's been down there, 80 years now. So we won't let anybody fix it now.
Mistakes and all, the Arizona State Capitol building was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1974. Years earlier, Arizona had outgrown its Capitol building and was entertaining designs for a new one. Visionary architect Frank Lloyd Wright submitted this imaginative plan for a building to be located at Papago Park. The idea gained little political traction and was rejected as being too costly. In 1957, the state took a more economical approach as it started construction on the new Senate and House buildings where lawmakers work today. The 24th Arizona Legislature was the first to use these buildings in 1960. governor's office remained in the old Capitol building until 1974, when Governor Jack Williams moved his office to the 9th floor of the new executive tower. A couple of years later, the state Capitol building underwent a massive renovation. By 1981, it emerged as a museum.
We are now in the governor's office.
At the time, so this is 1913.
This is the room where some of the exhibits for the Battleship Arizona are on display.
We're in the restored House chambers, the area that was used to make all the laws during the territorial period, as well as in early statehood.
Today, the old House chamber looks much as it did during the Constitutional Convention of 1910.
This is the place where some really exciting things happen. This room is where the Constitution for our state was actually written. I feel very close to that process when I'm in the room.
Through the years, he's also grown close to the building.
It's been a 19-year love affair to learn the building, learn all the changes been made over the years. It's been rewarding to see it come together and look so great.
In many ways, the Capitol has come full circle, and Winged Victory was here through it all. She kept watch over this building beneath her wings and the state of Arizona as it grew from 205,000 people in 1912 to about 5.5 million 9 decades later. During the mid-1990s, Michael Carman had been hoping Victory might be watching over something else, maybe some forgotten treasure trapped beneath the copper dome.
Well, you know, treasure for a historian is a package of letters, not necessarily gold bullion or anything.
For 10 long years, he'd been searching for a way to get inside and was close to giving up.
I was up on the roof with an architect, and I told him of my search for the access. And he said, well, I think it should be on the outside. Let's look at the dome. And he walked right up to it and put his hand on it.
It was a single copper panel, same as all the rest, except for 2 tiny screws holding it in place. Feeling a bit like Indiana Jones, Carman carefully removed a small section of the dome.
You feel a little bit foolish because, I mean, I should have looked there too, you know. But I doubt if I'd have seen those 2 small screws, not really knowing what I was looking for.
After years of dead ends and disappointment, he finally found this elusive portal to the past, and when he peered inside, to his utter amazement, he found
absolutely nothing. All thing I found in there were some of the lights that had been installed as temporary lighting for the workmen who were actually working in that area, and lots of dust. No letters, no treasures, just a little bit disappointed, yeah.
As it turns out, Victory doesn't keep any secrets. She simply waits and watches as Arizona history is made and then rediscovered. At the Arizona State Capitol Museum.